It is good to be here with you guys. So 4 days ago, in what he billed as a special primetime address, Donald Trump told the American people this.
We are likewise winning big in Iran, and you will see the fruits of that labor very, very shortly.
And tragically, what we saw this weekend was the death of 4 more American service members killed in action. The New York Times reports this. An American service member was killed in action on Saturday during the controlled detonation of a downed Iranian attack drone in northern Iraq. The announcement came a day after the military said that 2 U.S. soldiers had been killed in an Iranian attack in Jordan. That attack left a 3rd U.S. service member missing, and U.S. Central Command said on Sunday that remains found at the scene of that strike were being examined. This morning, the Pentagon identified the soldiers killed on Friday as 25-year-old Lieutenant Tyler James Feehan of Hawaii and 19-year-old Private Isabella Gonzalez of Texas. The death toll of U.S. service members is now at 18, according to the Pentagon's own online database. The Times also notes that dozens of service members have been injured, but we actually have no official reporting on the number or the graveness of the injuries. This is what they write. In the week leading up to the Iranian attack on Friday that killed 2 U.S. soldiers and left 1 service member missing in Jordan, Iran carried out 3 other strikes against U.S. forces in the country. Those attacks injured dozens of U.S. service members and damaged several helicopters, according to several U.S. officials who spoke on the condition of anonymity to discuss operational matters. But the Pentagon did not disclose the earlier strikes nor the casualties and damage they inflicted. The episode is the latest example during the Iran conflict of the tension between what the Pentagon says is the need for operational security and the government's obligation to inform the public about the conduct of the war. That report seems to have forced the Defense Department to address the situation. According to the Washington Post, the Pentagon said Monday that nearly 100 U.S. troops have been injured in the war with Iran over the last 2 weeks, underscoring the significance of Tehran's strikes on U.S. military installations across the region since negotiations to end the conflict collapsed. Sean Parnell, a Pentagon spokesperson, said on social media that nearly 100 service members were deemed to have some degree of injury since July 7th, with 96% of those since returning to duty. It was not clear whether those figures include all recent injuries. And now the war appears to be expanding as Iranian-backed rebels in Yemen move to blockade a key strait that had been used as an alternative to the Strait of Hormuz. To recap, it is day 143 of Trump's war in Iran. The war Donald Trump has told us many times we are winning. The war Donald Trump has told us many times is over. The war Donald Trump has said many times is not a war at all. But on Donald Trump's favorite channel, this is now being called an endless war.
So I think the president's in kind of a tough spot here in that sense. And, he promised to keep us out of endless wars or unsatisfactory wars. And now he's in one, and it's not at all clear how it's going to end.
Endless or unsatisfactory wars. Now, at least 18 service members, 18, are dead. And we don't know how much damage has been inflicted, nor at what cost. Trump wants $95 billion more for the war before the August recess, and even Republican House members are now balking. This is what Politico reports. House Republican leaders are making plans for a Trump administration official to attend Tuesday morning's GOP conference meeting on Capitol Hill to brief members on the latest developments in the war with Iran, according to 4 people granted anonymity to share private discussions. A growing number of House Republicans, including vulnerable incumbents, also have been asking GOP leaders and the White House for more information about the war before they vote Wednesday to advance a plan to free up $95 billion in additional funding for the Iran war, defense activities, and farm assistance. This is what a new Washington Post poll is showing. 69% of Americans disapprove of the way Donald Trump is handling the war in Iran. And 68% of Americans think the war in Iran was not worth fighting in the first place. After Trump said Americans would see the quote-unquote fruit of his war in Iran, quote-unquote, very shortly, gas prices shot up again to over $4 a gallon nationally and significantly over $4 in many states, including Pennsylvania and New York and Michigan, Arizona, California, even Alaska. Last night, returning home from a weekend at his golf club in New Jersey where he played golf and he hosted a party for the My Pillow guy, and then he attended the World Cup final where he tried to steal the moment from the winning team, Donald Trump had nothing of sense to say about when his war will end.
Well, you keep hitting me. This is a far bigger job that we're doing. We were doing a little job of stopping them from having a certain capability. Now we're just ending it. So it's really not the same thing. What we're doing now is we're ending any chance where they could have a nuclear missile. If you look at it, after a week and a half, not 4 weeks, a week and a half, 2 weeks, we stopped them from probably, but I don't want to have the word probably. Thank you very much.
Leading off our discussion tonight is Democratic leader Hakeem Jeffries. Leader Jeffries, it's good to see you. Thanks for being here.
Great to be with you.
Thanks so much. The news today is that more Americans have been killed in this endless war, as Fox put it now. And it seems to be escalating. Donald Trump is doing, in your estimation, what exactly?
Well, Donald Trump has gotten us into this reckless and costly war of choice that has resulted in Iran being stronger now than they were before this war started. And of course, the economic well-being of the American people being much weaker. Donald Trump promised America that he wasn't going to start endless wars, he was going to stop them. And then he turned around and, of course, has started this endless, reckless, costly war of choice in the Middle East, and he's got no way out. And now, tragically, you have more American heroes being killed.
The words that he spoke on the tarmac here as he departed the tri-state area were this: what we're doing now is we're ending any chance where they can have a nuclear missile. Is that what he's doing?
It's certainly not what he's doing. And in fact, Donald Trump is the same person who told us last year, after the United States bombed Iran, that the nuclear program of the Iranian regime had been completely and totally obliterated. His words, exactly. Not mine. And now a year later, he's basically saying that we've spent over $100 billion in taxpayer money. We've got more than 18 or so people who've been killed, dozens more, perhaps hundreds, seriously injured. And of course, gas prices are through the roof as a result of this endless war that Donald Trump has now started. And so, no, there never was any plan, there never was any strategy, there never were any obtainable objectives. It's just Donald Trump getting us involved in a mess over in the Middle East, and the American people now clearly rejecting it.
And, you know, I spent a lot of time talking to people all across the country in my day job. And you just mentioned the gas prices. You posted about this earlier today, too. You said gas prices are back above $4 a gallon. The Republican war of choice in Iran is making life more expensive. Why is Pete Hegseth still around? You know, he seems to be the most, I don't know, unbothered wartime defense secretary. There's no Republicans demanding a resignation. Nobody's asked for a course correction. He's focused on low T, testosterone, hormone tests, prayer sessions. I ask this only, I guess, half facetiously. Are Republican lawmakers you speak with aware of how the war in Iran is going?
Yeah, it's a really good question. It's unclear. Democrats, of course, successfully advanced the War Powers Resolution as part of our effort to end this reckless and costly war of choice over in the Middle East. And just a handful of Republicans have joined us. They continue to bury their heads in the sand, it appears, or just function like a reckless rubber stamp to Donald Trump's extreme agenda, even though it is hurting the very people that House Republicans currently represent. And the whole situation with Pete Hegseth, who, you know, seems to specialize in bravado but deliver nothing other than rhetoric, there's no reason for him to be around at this point in time. It was clear at the beginning he should have never been confirmed. He's deeply unqualified, in fact, the most unqualified Secretary of Defense in American history. And now you see the lack of ability, the lack of expertise, the lack of strategic planning having real life consequences in terms of what's been unfolding as it relates to Operation Epic Failure in Iran.
I want to talk about the money because the president wants $95 billion, I think, if I have it right. just for the supplemental. What is the actual price tag that Americans are being asked to pay for the war without, it seems, any real oversight at all?
Yeah, it's incredible to me that Donald Trump and Republicans would have the nerve to bring a reckless budget to the floor of the House of Representatives this week, where they will allocate over $70 billion in additional money for this failed and costly and reckless, endless war of choice over in the Middle East. House Democrats, needless to say, are going to strongly oppose it, and we just need a handful of enlightened Republicans, if there are any, to join us on behalf of the American people, because we believe that taxpayer dollars should actually be used to make life more affordable for everyday Americans, because the Trump economy is suffocating them right now. People are drowning, can't thrive, and can barely survive because of the high cost of living that Donald Trump and Republican policies continue to make worse.
You may have that chance in 106 days, if I got my numbers correct, because that is when the midterm elections are going to be, and the polls are saying that you're on track to be elected the next Speaker of the House on that day. And of course, obviously, there are many voters who are thinking about what Donald Trump and Republicans have done on redistricting, what they're going to possibly try to do to thwart that outcome, that crazy speech that he made last Thursday night. What would you tell those voters that are worried, not just about their futures, but about the integrity of the election that could determine them?
Well, we're going to work incredibly hard to make sure that we have the largest voter protection effort in the history of the country to ensure that there's a free and fair election in November. We believe that it's the American people who should decide who gets to represent them in Congress, not Donald Trump and MAGA extremists. We're working with our colleagues over in the Senate, with the Democratic Governors Association, of course, with the secretaries of state, with the Democratic Attorney Generals, with the DNC, as well as with civil society. That includes good government groups, civil rights groups, democracy protection groups, civil liberties groups, organized labor, and the faith community, to ensure that we do have a free and fair election. We do need everyday Americans to show up and produce an outcome that is too big to rig. That's exactly what happened over in Hungary, and we believe that we're going to work hard, do everything that we need over the next days, the next few weeks, the next few months, win the hearts and minds of the American people, and we can produce a victory for the American people in November, and Donald Trump won't be able to do anything about it.
Lay out the stakes, if you would. If the Democrats don't win control of the House nor the Senate, what are the next 2 years of Donald Trump's presidency going to look like? What is the biggest existential threat? What are you worried about the most?
We're in the middle of a national nightmare right now, and in order to take steps to decisively end it, we absolutely have to take back control of the House of Representatives, and hopefully things are moving in the right direction as well over in the United States Senate. So we can change direction. The American people clearly do deserve better. And we're going to fight to drive down the high cost of living. We're going to fight to make sure that health care is affordable for everyone all across the United States of America. We're also going to fight to end the rampant corruption that is taking place right now. Donald Trump and the cartel that he oversees has undertaken the largest smash and grab corrupt program in American history. And here's the problem for the American people, that if you got folks in government who are more focused on trying to enrich themselves, their family members, their friends, and their donors, one thing that's not happening is that these government officials are focused on making life better for everyday Americans. That's why we're committed to ending the corruption plague that exists in Washington, D.C. right now, because it's hurting our ability to actually make life more affordable for the American people, and it's costing them more, such as when you see this corrupt war that's going on right now over in the Middle East.
All right, the House Democratic leader, Hakeem Jeffries, it's great to see you tonight. Thanks for being here.
Thanks for having me.
Thanks. Coming up, how the actions of the commander-in-chief are making this conflict worse, not better, as Donald Trump's war in Iran shows no signs of ending. That's right after this short break. All right, check this out. Here is the new directive to the United States military from its current commander-in-chief. Every time Iran kills an American soldier, they will pay for that killing many times over. This directive has been passed on to Secretary of War Pete Hegseth, Chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff Daniel Kaine, and every leader in the military. Donald Trump posted that at 12:41 p.m. today. Over the weekend, when those Americans were killed fighting his war, Trump posted about Canada, and he posted about dancing in Scotland, and he posted about his monuments, and he posted about Greta Thunberg. And while Donald Trump is making lunchtime threats on social media, the conflict in the Middle East is expanding. Here's what the Washington Post reports. Yemen's Iranian-backed Houthi rebels announced Monday a blockade on Saudi Arabia's oil shipments through the Red Sea's Bab el-Mandeb Strait, closing off one of the Gulf's few alternatives to the Strait of Hormuz for exporting oil. If the Houthis were to successfully block the Red Sea route, that would reduce global oil supply by 7% at a time when the closure of the Strait of Hormuz has already halted 10% of global oil shipments. Joining us now is Lieutenant General Mark Hertling, retired commander of the U.S. Army in Europe. He is an MS Now military analyst. Good to see you. Thanks for being here.
It's great to be with you, Jacob. Thank you.
Thank you. I want to just read that one more time. Every time Iran kills an American soldier, they will pay for that killing many times over. This directive has been passed on, ... General, I'm not going to ask you what that means, but I will ask you what your response would be if you received that directive while in command.
Yeah, there's got to be a whole lot of translation of that within the Pentagon, Jacob. That's a retribution strategy, an attempt at more coercion. We're seeing, what I'm seeing as an analyst and watching these kind of operations is the United States has kind of passed into a new phase of this operations. They are now attacking the systems and encircling locations, cities, civilian cities, that allow the Iranian military to regenerate their power while also attempting to reduce Iran's government and society's will to continue to fight. They're not being very successful at that, even though they are attacking cities like Bandar Abbas, Isfahan, transportation hubs, bridges, power supplies, fuel distribution points. So the U.S. is trying to increase the economic pressure on Iran by doing all this. They're attempting to force a strategic decision on the part of the IRGC or the leaders who are making the decisions within Iran, but it's difficult to do that. Iran, on the other hand, is conducting strikes as well. And they're keeping the straits closed. As you just mentioned, they're recruiting the Houthis to start closing the Bab el-Mandeb, which is a port facilities and a type of strait to the west of the Strait of Hormuz, which is either going to further cause economic damage. They're dividing the U.S. from their allies in the region by striking targets in Jordan and Kuwait and UAE, Qatar, all the other countries that in the past have been very good allies to the United States. And then the last thing they're doing, Jacob, I'll say this because we've suffered the deaths that you've mentioned earlier in the show. They are using an attempt to hurt us tactically by killing forces, small numbers, because they know the U.S. culture. They know that we will advertise those deaths and it will cause pain to the president. So they're doing a bunch of things which are all in the realm of asymmetric warfare, and it all results in trading space for time. They know if they can continue to gain time in this campaign, the president will probably become more frustrated, do more damage, and still not cause any kind of issues that would return to what he would hope is normal operations of the economy and getting the military out of there.
You know, I'm not particularly sure that, I haven't, but Americans have ever been clear on what the objective of this war was supposed to be. But what should the objective be now?
Yeah, that's a tough question because the president has been all over the landscape in terms of what his stated objectives have been, and it's confused people. It's bounced from regime change, denuclearization, opening the straits, getting the allies in the region to pay for what he created, getting NATO allies to provide more support. Well, I would say the number one requirement right now is to try and get back to normal, where you can have discussions with Iran and bring about a peaceful solution. But I got to tell you, Jacob, that's a pipe dream right now because we don't trust them And they certainly don't trust us for the different things that the United States has done over the last 10 years or so, but also more recently in the last couple of months.
Lieutenant General Mark Hertling, I'm so grateful to have the opportunity to talk to you this evening. Thank you.
Same here. Thanks, Jacob. Appreciate it.
Thanks. Coming up, new calls for criminal charges against the ICE officer who killed that Colombian immigrant in Maine. But that comes as there are new questions about who will investigate ICE in these types of confrontations. That's next. Today, the family of the Colombian immigrant killed by an ICE officer in Maine is calling for criminal charges to be brought against that agent, the one who fired the fatal shots. 25-year-old Johann Sebastian Duran Guerrero was shot multiple times inside his vehicle during an ICE operation in Biddeford, Maine last week. For the record, Johann Guerrero was legally authorized to work in the United States and had been issued a Social Security number. In an interview with MS Now's Laura Hafley, his family's attorney Ben Gideon said this about the investigation.
There's a lot of different moving parts. I would say the most important thing right now is that there be a full investigation into what happened and an honest and neutral investigation. It's being led by the Attorney General's office in the state of Maine, which didn't have any involvement. There were no state officers, police officers, or local municipal police officers involved in the shooting. So we're hopeful that that can be done objectively and get to the truth here of really what happened. I can tell you, though, I haven't seen a single shred of evidence that Johann Sebastian did anything that would have justified the federal officers shooting him in cold blood, driving on his way to work early in the morning on July 13th.
Their call for criminal charges comes as questions grow over who investigates when ICE or other federal immigration officers use deadly force. According to the new reporting in the New York Times, federal agents around the country were told in recent days that the FBI would no longer investigate confrontations with immigration agents. Under the change, responsibility for investigating cases involving federal immigration officers would likely fall to Homeland Security Investigations, an arm of ICE, effectively leaving the agency to investigate itself, according to guidance circulated among FBI and ICE agents. The Justice Department and DHS have both publicly denied that any policy change has been made. But if it were, it could mean less independent federal scrutiny of deadly encounters involving ICE agents. Even before this reported policy change, for months there had been questions about the independence of Kash Patel's FBI and how much oversight the FBI has actually provided. It has now been 6 months since American citizens Renee Good and Alex Preddy were killed by federal immigration agents in Minneapolis, Minnesota. Hennepin County Attorney Mary Moriarty, who is leading the state investigation into those killings, says federal prosecutors only last week turned over evidence that had been withheld for months.
Through the cooperation of our federal partners, we have obtained the hard drives of previously withheld evidence in the killings of Renee Good and Alex Preddy and the shooting of Julio Sosa Solis. We have also obtained some of the physical evidence that was previously withheld, including Renee Good's car. I want to thank our federal partners for their willingness to consider changing course, to share evidence and promote public trust. Obtaining this evidence has been a priority for us since January 7th. It has been rightfully demanded by our community for the past 6 months.
And joining us now is Hennepin County Attorney Mary Moriarty. It's good to see you. Thanks for being here.
Thank you for inviting me to be with you.
You got it. I want to start by just asking you what your experience has been like working with the FBI before this reported change. When I was in your state after the shootings and I spoke with Governor Walz, he just seemed so incredibly frustrated by the lack of cooperation between the local officials and the state officials. And the federal officials, as well as with the state officials. You have said your office, received these hard drives. There was previously withheld evidence. Tell us about the state of the investigation, the cooperation as it stands today with the FBI.
I think in light of what you reported earlier about the directive apparently to the FBI, it's probably important to differentiate between our local federal law enforcement and the administration. From the beginning, when Renee Good was shot, we had an agreement with the U.S. Attorney's Office and the FBI and the Bureau of Criminal Apprehension to do a joint investigation. And then at some point, the administration put a stop to that.
Right.
Those conversations have never really stopped between local law enforcement because everybody here understands that's the way it should be. But as we saw through Julio Sosa Solis and certainly with Alex Preddy, we were not getting any evidence, nor was the BCA allowed to even enter the scene. So it was in the last 4 or 5 weeks that we.
Go ahead. Sorry.
Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No, please.
In the last 4 or 5 weeks, we had conversations that started up again, and the local U.S. Attorney's Office and FBI all agreed to share their evidence, and I should say the BCA, and we also agreed to share our evidence on those 3 cases.
Your Bureau of Criminal Apprehension there. Is there anything that you've received that has changed your understanding of what happened in either the cases of Renee Good or Alex Preddy?
We got voluminous evidence here, terabytes of it, and so our teams are looking through it. To the extent that I've seen any of it, I've seen limited body cams, and those pretty much affirm what we saw in the other video. So we are going to take a long, hard look and be thorough here. And as you were quoting Mr. Gideon before, everybody here deserves a fair and impartial investigation and a transparent decision and the reason why that decision is being made. And so that's our goal.
Just to remind our audience, is it up to you specifically to decide to bring charges in the killings of these 2 Americans? And if I'm not mistaken, you have already charged 2 others involved in Operation Metro Surge, just not in the killings themselves, correct?
That's correct. We made a decision to charge Mr. Castro in shooting Julio Sosa Solis. He is currently in a Texas prison awaiting extradition. We charged Gregory Morgan in kind of a road rage incident here. We are waiting for the judge to schedule an evidentiary hearing on removal. So I think people can understand that there's the federal government and local government, and there's no double jeopardy. In other words, local government or our office can bring charges. The federal government, the U.S. Attorney's Office can bring charges as well. So either one of us can bring charges. To this point, the U.S. Attorney's Office has not brought any charges or brought any indictments. We have on those 2 cases, and we continue to investigate the killings of Renee Good and Alex Preddy.
Hennepin County Attorney Mary Moriarty, thank you so much for being here. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Joining us now is Barbara McQuade, the former U.S. attorney and a law professor at the University of Michigan Law School. She is an MS Now legal analyst. Her new book is The Fix, Saving America from the Corruption of a Mob-Style Government. It is coming out tomorrow, but you can pre-order it tonight. Barbara, I want to start by saying I'm looking forward to the book, number one, but I want to play what Border Czar Tom Homan said today when he was asked about this New York Times reporting. Let's watch.
In my confrontations, it's always been history that, for instance, what happened in Minneapolis and Chicago and Newark, prosecution of 111 cases, which are assault on law enforcement officers, is usually handled by HSI, criminal investigations. The FBI does get involved with them, but we're not leading. But when it comes to shootings, the FBI is always taking the lead.
So I think, if I'm following correctly, he says that the FBI will continue to lead shooting investigations, but he says HSI, Homeland Security investigations, which is actually a part of ICE, for people that don't know this, within Immigration and Customs Enforcement, HSI, they do things like sex trafficking, human trafficking, but also other types of investigations. He says they're leading it, but FBI will remain involved. Does that square with your understanding of how these investigations work?
Well, I think it's important to clarify what we're talking about. The reporting is about ICE-involved assaults.
Right.
So there are assaults on ICE officers, and those may be reviewed by Homeland Security investigations. But I think the more troublesome thing is when ICE is involved in an assault on a citizen or a resident of this country. And if this reporting is accurate, that this is going to be turned over to ICE in its Homeland Security investigations, it becomes a nullity. And that's because only the FBI has jurisdiction to investigate civil rights cases. And it's civil rights laws that get prosecuted when there is an officer-involved shooting. So they're playing very cute with what's happening here. I'd like to get a straight answer. The Justice Department, the FBI, and Homeland Security have not really given a straight answer on what's happening, but there is reporting from individuals that the FBI is no longer going to be involved. And if that's the case, that means there will not be federal investigations when ICE is involved in shooting civilians.
Whether it's Renee Nicole Good or Alex Preddy or Johann Sebastian now, in Maine, there are way too many of these types of stories almost to count at this point. And yet I think that the American public still believes that the FBI should and at least will show up on the scene of these crimes. But walk us through more of the cooperation between the FBI and state and local prosecutors, what it normally looks like, and whether it's a use of force investigation or a civil rights investigation, who is actually responsible for gathering evidence and sharing it? Because as I mentioned to the Hennepin County attorney, Tim Walz, when I was in Minnesota after the shooting, was incensed that his Bureau of Criminal Investigations folks from the state level were not allowed to be involved in that investigation.
Yeah, that is very unusual traditionally, and this is in the administrations of Republican and Democratic presidents. There are parallel investigations. That's because states are separate sovereigns, and the federal government is supposed to show respect to state sovereigns. And so when there's an investigation, both of the investigative agencies on the state and federal side will investigate in parallel. That's because there could be two criminal prosecutions. We saw that in the case of the George Floyd death. We saw it in the case of Ahmaud Arbery, where we have both state and federal charges. It's because there are charges that are appropriate that need to be vindicated by both sovereigns. So in a state, it might be a murder charge, it might be a manslaughter charge. In the federal system, it might be a civil rights charge, but each of those entities has a right to bring that case. And so ordinarily, it's done very cooperatively. You don't have to do what Mary Moriarty had to do, which is file a lawsuit to get the evidence to which she was entitled. And in fact, most often, I remember when I was serving as U.S. Attorney in Detroit, we might have a case involving a federal officer who may have killed somebody who is a resident of a particular community. We would often let the state or locals go first because they had such a compelling interest in protecting the interests of their citizen, their resident who had been killed. We would continue with our parallel investigation, and we might review what happened there to see if we were satisfied with the charges or if we thought federal charges were necessary as well.
That is such important context. Barbara McQuade, thank you so much, and congratulations on your new book.
Thanks, Jacob.
Good to see you. Coming up, Elon Musk could be facing criminal charges for how he tried to buy off the election for Wisconsin State Supreme Court last year. Defeating Musk and Republicans in that race and other local races like it was a key win, not just for Democrats, but also for democracy. We're going to discuss why after the break. Tonight, Elon Musk could be facing criminal charges in Wisconsin because it turns out that the world's richest Republican cannot just buy his way out of losing an election. In April of 2025, just weeks after Elon Musk was seen on television upstaging Donald Trump in the Oval Office, you might remember that Wisconsin held a state Supreme Court election, the first big election anywhere in the country since Donald Trump was inaugurated for the second time. And what happened? Elon Musk spent more than $20 million backing the conservative candidate in that race. He traveled to Wisconsin. He put on a Green Bay Packers cheesehead hat at a rally of about 2,000 people, and he handed out two $1 million checks to two voters while offering cash incentives to others tied to that election. And now, the bipartisan Wisconsin Elections Commission has concluded that Elon Musk likely broke the state's election bribery law. This commission voted 5-1 to refer the complaints to the Brown County District Attorney, who will now decide whether to pursue criminal charges for Elon Musk's election tactics. Musk had repeatedly argued that the judicial election would shape the future of congressional redistricting in Wisconsin, and that matters because that could ultimately affect which political party controls the United States House of Representatives next year. But Wisconsin voters rejected Musk's preferred candidate by 10 points. And they voted instead for the liberal candidate, former prosecutor Susan Crawford. On that particular election night, our next guest, Ben Winkler, Wickler, who was then Wisconsin's Democratic Party chair, called into this program. You remember? Just after the liberal victory was announced, and said Wisconsin voters saw exactly what Elon Musk was up to.
They know that he is grabbing money out of their pockets in order to stuff them into his own pockets. He was trying to buy this state the way he bought Brad Schimmel, his preferred Supreme Court candidate. And voters found that outrageous. They flatly rejected it. Now we know, and the jig is up.
The jig is up. That election offered Democrats a lesson that extends well beyond Wisconsin. State Supreme Courts, legislatures, governors, too, increasingly determine everything from voting rules to congressional maps. Winning those down-ballot races can be just as consequential as winning at the federal level. National generic congressional polls right now show Democrats with an advantage in single-digit margins, though mostly still within the margin of error. In his new book, This is the Plan: How to End America's Meltdown and Save Democracy, Ben Wickler argues that the battles shaping American democracy are often decided far from Washington. They're decided in state courts and in state legislatures and local elections where the rules of democracy are written. Ben writes of the Wisconsin State Supreme Court election, quote, "This is a book about why elections like Susan Crawford's are so important, maybe not to the entire future of the human race, which will hopefully be pretty long, but to the future of democracy and the possibility of a fair economy in the United States. But this book isn't just an analysis. It's a prescription. The point is not to monitor the situation, but to change it." Joining us now is Ben Wickler, the former Democratic Party chair of Wisconsin. He is author of this book, This is the Plan: How to End America's Meltdown and Save Democracy, which is out tomorrow. It's so good to see you. It's good to hold this in my hands. It feels pretty meaty.
I'm pretty excited. It's in your hands and is about to be in a lot more people's hands. I wrote this book after 6 years leading the Democratic State Party in Wisconsin. It was a state that not very long ago was more rigged, more gerrymandered, more voter suppression, more dominated by a far-right state Supreme Court than the United States of America is right now. It seemed more hopeless to people in our state, but thousands of people rolled up their sleeves, and we tested and we tried a million different ways to fight and win elections and figured out how to unrig our state step by step. So in this book, I take that blueprint, that battle plan, and I map it out on the national stage for what people can do everywhere in this nation to get us out of this flaming train wreck that Donald Trump and the current GOP have driven the United States into.
It's the exact book we need right now, but this even more recent news, when you hear that the Elections Commission says that Musk may have very well broke election law in Wisconsin, what goes through your head?
The first thing that goes through my head is that Donald Trump's pardon power does not apply to convictions in state courts.
You better believe it.
States are, frankly, where a lot of the action is right now. And there rightly is a ton of energy to elect a new majority, a Democratic majority in the House and the U.S. Senate this cycle. But it's states that the U.S. Constitution puts in charge of running elections. So whenever Donald Trump has a freak out about the fact that he is so incredibly, hideously unpopular, he starts trying to come up with ways to take over the election system. He can't, as long as there are Democratic governors, attorneys general, state Supreme Court justices who stand in his way. They actually have the power over this. So this book is a battle plan to make sure that that line of defense is secure before we get to 2028 and his next chance to attempt a national coup.
It was really amazing to hear you, to play back that clip that I think viewers of this program will definitely remember, and think about what you said on that night, that Wisconsin voters rejected the influence of billionaires in your state. Does this new development vindicate that?
Absolutely. The opening scene in the book is Elon Musk going in Green Bay and putting that cheese head on his head and saying, this race will affect the entire future destiny of all of humanity. And he thought that he was going to demonstrate that as the richest man in the world, he had unchallengeable power, that he could buy whatever election he wanted, just as in the view of Donald Trump at the time and a ton of the country, he had bought the presidential election for his preferred presidential candidate. If he had won, then candidates at all levels of government would have run screaming from the possibility that he might throw a few tens of millions of dollars at them.
And hold those stupid, giant fake checks up in order to convince these voters.
Absolutely. It was the most disgusting and obscene and frankly cynical approach to politics that you can imagine. And for a lot of people, it seemed like it might work. You know, later financial disclosures showed that his total investment in that race, including all of his kind of attempted election bribes, $56 million,
Wow.
more than anyone's ever spent in a judicial election anywhere. But we won in Wisconsin. Susan Crawford won that race, not just because he pissed everybody off, and not just because she was an amazing candidate, she was, but also because of this neighbor-to-neighbor organizing across the state, the unions, the grassroots groups that decided not just to fight in the big elections where everyone's paying attention, but to fight in every election that might affect the future of democracy in our state. And that's the kind of approach that we need now in this country. We know that these local county clerks, we know that secretaries of state that do never get in the national headlines.
Well, they're threatened with arrest.
Yeah, they're threatened with arrest right now because Trump knows that they could actually thwart his ambitions to become a king.
So my guess is there are people all across the country, election officials, not just election officials, but everyday citizens that are going to look at this book and say, what are the lessons that my state can learn from Wisconsin in order to uphold American democracy? What are those lessons that they are going to take away?
The biggest lesson is, as I point out in this book, a mind-bogglingly large amount of the time, elections with mind-bogglingly huge consequences come down to mind-bogglingly small margins.
Yeah.
But those races tend to be the races that do not get wall-to-wall national coverage. And that means that if you want to personally be involved in saving democracy, getting some friends together and zeroing in on those state legislative, those local races that set the rules for our democracy is a way that you can become the hero that this country is waiting for and prevent the MAGA meltdown from inflicting itself on the future of our country.
The book is This is the Plan, How to End America's Meltdown and Save Democracy. The author is Ben Wickler. Thank you so much for being here. Congratulations and good luck.
Thanks for having me on.
Appreciate you. That is tonight's Last Word.